Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Real Talk Family Life, building Shatterproof families one brick at a time. I am your host, Sasha Sutherland, and this evening we have three very esteemed gentlemen to lead our discussions on systemic challenges in familial relationships. It is going to be an exciting time. We hope that you enjoy the program. We hope that you are blessed by it. And please do not hesitate to use your emojis, to raise your hands, use the chat feature if you have a comment, post your questions as we continue this season of really uplifting families and teaching what the gospel tells us we're supposed to be as Christians. So I want to give each panelist an opportunity to introduce themselves. Obviously, they are not new faces, but it's always good, to get them to clear their voices, get the frog out the throat, etc. And I want to come to one of my favorite people first, Pastor Griffith. Would you please introduce yourself in 30 seconds or less?
Hi, good evening. Curly, Pastor Griffith here. Just kind of name Pastor, but just like you, try to understand the word, try to make it relate to my life and to my children and people as naturally as I possibly can. Simply, that is me.
Thank you. Newer to the program is Brother Arthur Pear, has been doing a fantastic job helping us in understanding gender roles and some of the challenges that we have in the family. And I am looking forward to engaging with Brother Pear this evening. Over to you.
Good evening, folks. The name is Arthur Pear. I'm from Grenada, beautiful Spice Isle country, full of spice. Christian, family man, and I have a heart for men and family, and I'm happy to be, trust me, I was looking forward to maybe even doing a show like this, but I'm really, really happy to have found a home here, and I would do all I can, share all the experiences and the knowledge that I can so that we could build this.
Thank you. And of course, another one of our favorite personalities, Pastor Anthony Henry, our host pastor from Faith Tabernacle in Trinidad and Tobago. He is definitely a man of wisdom, a man who tries his best to speak God's word. And I'm not going to do the introduction for you, Pastor Henry. Over to you in 30 seconds or less.
Thank you, Dr. Sutherland. And it's a pleasure again to be with you on the program. What can I say? I love the Lord and I love family. And so whatever we can do to build our families, make them stronger, it is my pleasure.
Thank you. So again, this evening, we're going to talk about systemic challenges in familial relationships. We started off with gender roles earlier, in the earlier sections of the program. We spoke about the roles of women made in the image of God, man made in the image of God, and the challenges that oftentimes may occur when men and women try to work in unison in building their family ministries. Tonight, we want to talk about some of the systemic challenges that affect familial relations. We want to talk about some of those topics that we sometimes find it difficult to engage as Christians for fear of not knowing enough about the subject, not knowing how to represent the scriptures. And we hope tonight will really be a blessing to each and every person represented on Zoom and on YouTube. So first question to our panelists this evening. I want to start by just identifying maybe three challenges that affect families. And when I say families, I have Christians as the adjective, Christian families that we can identify as systemic. Brother Pear, I want to start with you. Three challenges, major ones that affect Christian families that we can identify as systemic.
Okay, I want to begin to answer that question by first looking at the internal issues of families. Now, there is a gentleman who wrote a book, I think Dr. Edwin Lewis Cole, that I read some years ago. And he cited three things that really create problems for couples. And they are communication, sex, and money. Now, to be able to withstand or to stand up against the external pressures and trust me, we have a lot, the external pressures, there must be an internal fortitude with individuals and within the family that must be there to help withstand some of the things that families are faced with today. Now, if we cannot communicate well, if we don't have that nice fluid communication within the family structure, you don't have some of the values within the family structure, you don't know how to balance the issues of finances, you don't know how to maneuver around the issues of sex within the family. The external pressures will have its toll on that particular family structure. Okay? It has a lot to do with the values that family would hold on to be able to withstand some of the issues. Now, let me just give you, I love when I say things like that to give you an example. And I want to use my own family and my own family structure. I like to do that because I learn from my children and I learn from just the experience. My sons, my children, they have a friend, and you know, he's not as fortunate. He has little parents, they don't bother with him. So my son and so on, you could say almost adopt him. So he used to be in the house regularly. On Sundays, he would come, you know, we would have family meal and all of that together. And we realized that he was actually breaking into our house when we are not around, okay? So my children became very angry. They became upset and all of that. Now, one of the things in family devotions, I brought up the issue of forgiveness. Oh boy, we had a field day with that. We had a field day because they now had to balance when we talk about forgiveness, what exactly this is, and how you live it, not just say it and see it written in scripture, but how you actually live it. Right? So we are asking, can you forgive this young man for the things that you have done? He would have stolen things that belong to them, things that they hold dear to, but can you forgive? You know, and they had the debate, right? Now, I'm saying all of this to say that as a family, we have to look at the values and we have to examine the values and see whether or not we can actually live up to the values that has been placed in the Bible, and how should we approach it, not only for us as adults, but how do we pass on those gems to our children so that when they go out into the world and they have the pressures of the world, that they could still remain steadfast in what the Bible preaches. Now, it is difficult, but it is necessary. Mm-hmm. The Bible does not lie, and it is true. In the truest sense of the word, it is so very true that when we begin to live like that, we sometimes come above the noise of the world. We sometimes conquer the noise of the world simply by withstanding and holding fast to the truth of the Bible.
Thank you. Pastor Griffiths, do you want to identify a different challenge? I'm going to come back to you, Brother Pear, because you talk about challenges that come externally, but I also want to come back to you.
Can't hear it right now on Zoom. Can't do it now.
But when those challenges come within the family, and one of the major challenges while we wait on Pastor Griffith is something
tomorrow. I can't talk. Go.
To us about related to domestic violence, for example, and the fact that you may try to live right with your family, but perpetuating values that you were never taught is often difficult. So can you just touch on that a bit?
Sure. I think I would have mentioned before that one of the things that I do is deal with men who are perpetrators of domestic violence. And one of the things that they say, I mean, since 2007, I've been involved in this. One of the things that a number of our men are saying is that they were never taught that. They were never taught that they need to respect their women. They were never taught that they need to be a servant leader. They were never taught that they need to sit down and discuss issues, even things that they may want to choose. They were never taught that, right? And because they never taught that, they never practiced that. What they practice is what they might have seen before. So they might have seen their father hitting and cussing and carrying on and drinking and having more than one woman. And so that is what they would have looked up to. That's the person, the male figure that they would have looked up to, and they basically would just behave the same. All right. Now, when you to be able to create change in persons like that, you have to let them see how important it is to respect the next individual. Just as the way that they would want to get the respect from their children, from their girlfriends or their wives, they have to see that they need to be able to give that respect and give that honor and really and truly become the servant leader that is so needed within the family structure.
Thank you. So Pastor Griffith, over to you. What's one major challenge that you would say affects Christian families, and what are the resulting consequences of that challenge?
Well, again, good evening. I want to approach it from the angle of bad relationships, and you probably mentioned one by at poor interaction, and Brother Pierre did mention what I call here improperly shaped values. And I believe that these are real challenges that affect not only Christian families, but is really universal. And when they talk about relationships, I tend to suggest saying that relationships kind of provide love, tend to provide the idea of advice and care. And what becomes important for us is how do we cultivate relationship? And perhaps I would want us to pause a little bit and to understand what we mean when we talk about relationships. And I use a definition here, not mine. It says that when we talk about relationship, we talk about the way in which two or more people or groups talk to or behave towards each other or deal with each other. And I am quite certain that all of us can, whether we be Christian or not, we can look within our lives and ask ourselves, what kind of relationship do we have? How do I talk to other people in my family? How do I behave towards them? And how do I deal with them, even with their varying differences, right? So I therefore say that relationships is important. I will probably come back more in detail to that. In regards to interaction, I mean, that must speak to itself. Ties still to the idea of relationship. How do we relate? How do we interact? And the definition for that is the action or influence of things on one another. How do we influence one another as a family? Good, bad, and how does that prepare us to be facing the world as it is? And I'll just add one more definition to that, and I'll pause as an opening, that the act of talking or doing things with others, or that mutual do back to one another, how do we establish that? So I think that there is a lot of challenge. How do we manage our relationships? And how do we manage our interaction with one another? And I believe that this is systemic. It affects the whole family. It affects society. It affects the church. I pause.
And Pastor Henry, in identifying one of your major challenges, can you also answer the question with how we get families to accept those challenges with an aim to address them? You're muted.
Just trying, Dr. Sutherland, just trying to get families to address the problems is one of the major problems of the systemic problems in society. The problems, all of the problems, be they cultural, social, psychological, financial, most of them have their root in a spiritual nature. The root is in a spiritual nature. And in our world of materialism, we find it difficult to talk to people about spirituality, because people want to touch and see what exists. The only thing that has value is that which we can touch with our hands. And so when you think of love, when you think of kindness, when you think of these virtues that are not material in nature, people are not so concerned about them. They're not as important. And the absence of these virtues from the family is, to a great extent, what is causing most of the problems in families today. We need to address these issues from to see the system that is behind it. As preachers, we are quick to say the devil, the devil, and indeed he is the one behind it all. But how he has organized, sometimes he pulls us into his very system, into his very organization, to perpetuate what he is doing. And so we say the devil, and yet we blame him for everything. And yet I'm using an example here, yet we find the time and lots of time to sit down and watch movies that he uses to infiltrate our children's mind with his values. See, so we need to understand that the big problem that we have is a spiritual problem. And the Church of Jesus Christ, the Christian church, those of us who are Christians, and I'm not talking about organization, I'm talking about those of us who are Christians, we have a big job today to restore and to put back and to help families to see how valuable these virtues are to us and how they are to the family, how trust and trustworthiness play an important role in everyday relationship, what kindness means, what long-suffering means, and our brother spoke about forgiveness, and not just giving definitions, but what it means in real life. What do these virtues mean in real life? How do we live them? We need to manifest that to our society, our world.
And I like that, off the bat, we start going behind the root causes that affect, or the root systemic causes or attacks on Christian families. So for the audience, we would usually talk about things like anti-Christian culture. We talk about drug and alcohol abuse. We talk about materialism. We talk about, the fact that there's absenteeism in the home, when in fact, those are just the fruit of those larger attacks or systemic challenges that the panelists have just spoken about when you talk about communication and relationships and interaction. So looking at the fruit or the manifestations of those challenges, can you tell us what has been your experiences with families dealing with each of these issues? Because I am sure for the persons who are participants on the program tonight, we're hearing you and we understand it. But then when those things manifest in the home, whether it be one of those examples we just gave, drug, alcohol abuse, anti-Christian behavior, divorce, abortion, how do we deal with the fruit and the root causes of those issues? And you've addressed the root causes, but can you speak a bit about your experience dealing with families who try to address the fruit of those challenges? I'm going to come to Brother Pear first.
A lot of times when families have issues, especially, well, from my experience, the issues of drugs, right? The children, even the issues of sexually transmitted infection within the family. Again, my experience. One of the first things that you can hear is a blame. Somebody is responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody is to be blamed. Again, I'm sorry, but I look at the experiences, and one of the things just came to mind. There was a young girl who we caught while I was working in drug control. We found her in school with a marijuana, right? And we brought the mother, the father in, and the young lady. So we sat down and we were kind of peeling back the layers to find exactly what was happening. And she said that she has been smoking for over 3 or 4 years. Now, I saw the jaw of the father and the mother drop because they could not believe it. They could not believe it. And she went on to explain when she was trying to stop and there was a vehicle that used to pass and that person always smoking marijuana, and when she got the scent of it, it just brought her right back. And then she went on to deal with how the relationship that she had with both the mother and the father. The fact that they just never bothered with her, the fact that she had to do even her schooling and her studies on her own. Nobody even looked at her books. Nobody they provided the things to eat and so, but there was no communication and no, like, she was alone within the family.
Mm-hmm.
She was alone within the family structure. So she gravitated to something that gave her a little bit of easement, that allowed her to just have some nice times and so forth, right? But this thing just did not happen now. It was something that was there long before. A lot of times, the issues within families don't just appear. They are gradually built, okay? And if persons within the family structure, if the mother and the father don't take notice of it, you would eventually see a tearing away of family members doing things and behaving in particular ways that are not necessarily nice for the family. So when we look at the issues of values, at the issues of things that we must uphold, and I mean, let me tell you, communication is one of the strings that kind of pull families together. Mm-hmm. If you cannot sit and talk to your children, and you don't develop that attitude at a very early age, really and truly having serious conversation, not just asking, how was your school today? And they say something and you just leave it like that. But you actually go into some of the issues of school, go into some of the things that might have occurred with your children at school, with their teacher. My children just talk too much for me, simply because I think I have asked too many questions. I like to mind my children's business, so to speak. And we have to become so very involved with them that when they grow older, they would come and tell you everything that they might be experiencing and problems that they may be facing, that if you left alone, somebody else may come and influence them into doing something else. The issue of communication is critical for a family and the development of family. Now, there are a number of other issues. We talk about communication, sex, and money. Finances is another thing, right? You have values around material things. Your children have to see that you work hard. And when you have the monies that you gain, that you're using it for their benefit, for the development of the family, for your own personal development, not necessarily just branding it all over. The other thing is that they must place value on themselves first as individuals. Now, too often we have persons preying on our young people simply because they could provide them with some materialistic thing. Give them a cell phone, give them some credit, buy some and they are persons who would devalue your children, who would devalue your offspring simply because of material gains. We have now to refocus our children, letting them understand that there is more value in individuals than in material things. All right, and I want to rest there. But those are just some of the issues that I realize that a number of our young people face. And it is a problem that exists within a number of families, even Christian families and Christian homes.
Pastor Griffith?
Imagine a mother and a daughter living in the same house. And each person is in and out of the house, do their own business. Each person finds his own food. Each person washes his own clothes. And you come home and each of you go into your own bedroom. All right? That is one of the realities of what happens out there. And it brings into question the idea of interaction. And can you really appreciate the kind of atmosphere that happens in that house? Think about when those persons go out there and they interact with the wider world. We have heard the idea, for example, where they say he can work with all the work on his shoulder, or he bring problems from home to work and vice versa. So I also want to pick up on something that Brother Pierce said. I like to see some of these challenges / problems, even the solution to them, that I like to compare them between in the idea of health, that which is chronic and that which is acute. For my purpose, there are things that will happen that, like a broken foot, something happens suddenly in the house. I need to correct and deal with now and respond to now. But then there are those conditions that come about gradually because I start eating enough sugar for my time I was born. All right, or enough salt as it is. And over time, I have developed habits that are detrimental to my being, right? In the same way, we can also develop good habits. I don't know if I can use the word chronic good habits, but I'm coining it. So what I'm saying is that a lot of the issues that we get, whether it has to do with relationships or whether it has to do with interaction, they didn't come overnight. And because they didn't come overnight, the solution is not an overnight thing. I give you one example before I pause. I have been struggling, this is years now, I don't know, 6, 7, I don't know, realizing that sleeping on my side causes me all kind of pain, So to me, the best way for me to do now is to lay down on my back. And even after 5 years, it is really difficult for me to keep laying down on my back. And that, I think, is a good illustration of why the challenges that we have are so difficult to deal with, because most of them are chronic. They have occurred for over a year, a long period, and how do we undo that difficulty? The issue about it is that we must understand, even in the medical world, that a lot of the expense on our medical system, so I think somebody said America is spending about $3 billion annually in addressing chronic issues. What am I saying here? That to what extent, in other words, these long-term things can be so destructive to our families. We need to intervene. I pause.
Pastor Henry.
The intervention that is necessary has to come from a re-education of, come through a re-education of our societies. And the whole system has to change. Generally, the family today, and COVID has taught it, COVID has shown us this more pronouncedly than anything else. The children, parents depend on the society and the schools and the government to provide training for the children. There was a time when the school taught us how to add and to spell and to read, not values. Values came from home. I remember as a little boy hearing that your Henrys are not supposed to go to jail. And my parents then were not evangelical Christians, but they knew what it was to teach their children certain values, certain principles. That has broken down badly. And we have to, instead of going out there and just Jesus saves, we have to go there with a different program. Jesus saves, yes, but what happens after Jesus has saved? And we have to develop that within our minds, that when we go to a family, when we go to a person to be saved, we are thinking about family. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, the apostle said, and thou shalt be saved and thy household. When the household is saved, what sort of a image, what sort of a mental image do we have for that family? And mind you, the family, it will be coming from the people who are coming to your church. They're coming from various backgrounds, already made, and as Pastor Griffith said, already placed into habits that have been developed by society. And these kind of things are not going to fall off overnight. The guy who comes in and lived a lifestyle with the men and being gay and pretending that he is and acting effeminate, when he comes into church, he cannot just start to act like a man. But we have to have a mindset and a people who are there to receive him and to understand all of that, and to understand that just the same way as the young man who gave up running women, that this man has given up his lifestyle, and we should be able to accept him and to prepare him for the kingdom like anybody else. We should be able to understand, just as how the guy who or the lady who was into all sorts of a living would make mistakes at times, and we would forgive and help lift them up. The same way this person who may have been on that side of the fence, when that person makes mistake, we have to go and bring them, lift them like the good shepherd, bring them back to the fold and help them along. Somehow we are not quite oriented for that as yet. And I think that the longer we take to have that sort of a orientation, it's going to take us a longer time to get with the family. So you're listening this evening, and you're a family member. Let me ask you to be honest. What if your daughter comes home and says to you, I feel that I am a lesbian? Your Christian daughter, yes, she comes home and says to you, I feel that I am a lesbian. What are you going to do with her? Carry her to the mental hospital? What are you going to do with her? Throw her out of the house? What are you going to do with her? Now for you to answer. But I think we need to understand these are the issues that we face, and we have to be able to deal with them.
I want to just bring a little bit of clarity as the definition of habit. You know, and I love to say it. I had the privilege of talking to some teenage boys on Saturday morning, and we were talking about that. You know, developing good habits. Now, if you look at the word habit, H-A-B-I-T, if you take off the H, you have a bit. If you take off the A, you have bit. If you take off the B, you still have it. It's very, very difficult to break. And we have to do what we can in a systematic way, in a consistent way, in a way that teaches love and teaches the issues to be strong and courageous, and so that those things can be dissolved. Of course, we do have the Holy Spirit, and we do have prayer that we could use as tools to break those habits.
Yes. Thank you. I mean, we have jumped right into the middle of it, and it's a fantastic segue into the next segment. But before we go there, I see Aisha's hand is raised. Aisha, you can unmute and quickly make your contribution.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sunderland, esteemed panel. I wanted to say, I have a whole heap of things to say, but I'm only going to say two. One is, I believe that family interaction is very much under threat because of technology, right? You can have a family sitting at a table and everyone is on their device. They're sitting across from each other and text each other to come and say something. So you find that, yes, parents are babysitting their children with devices, but you also have grannies that can't get off of Facebook or Instagram. So you can't just blame it on the young people, right? The entire family is craving information, craving entertainment, craving everything. So that's one. So I wanted to get your take on that. And secondly, the gay lifestyle, the rainbow, whatever you want to say, is glorified on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. And it's like, it is not just a way to be, but it is a way to make money because people follow you, because people comment on you, because people share. So there is a financial benefit right now for persons to actually, whether there are or not, we would never really know. But to act this way because it is more acceptable now, and people like, hey, since you are so flamboyant, and I need you to, promote my product. And so it changes the way that we look at persons that are what we would say effeminate or are funny or whatever it is. Yeah. So I will shut up now, and I will let you go on with the program. But those are just the two of my distinct observations as it relates to family interaction, as it relates to the perpetuation of the gay lifestyle. Okay.
Yeah. Media influence is definitely something huge when you talk about distractions and the movement away from Christian principles to secularism. Definitely. So thank you for that contribution. Aisha, I want to remind everyone else, if you have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. If you have a comment, if you're uncertain about something that was said, if you disagree with something, please feel free, use the chat function, use the emojis, let us know what you think. We're going to look across to at YouTube as well. We are looking for your comments there. So good night to those of you joining us on YouTube as well. So I want to segue based on what Pastor Henry said, unless any of the panelists wanted to respond to Aisha's comments about materialism and media influences. We know that these are some of the major distractions to the family. So Feel free to comment on it if you want to. If not,
Yeah.
you can-
What Aisha said is a stark reality. And I mean, we have so many different means to communicate, right? Yet we don't,
Mhm.
right? We have the cell phone, we have the computer, we have the tablet, we have all the software in and between, but we don't. And it is time that we recognize that and we take some time off where we put all of those gadgets down and we really have some serious heart-to-heart conversation within the family. Too often, we believe that we have arrived when we could purchase all of these items and use it, not necessarily in a way that would benefit family and family relations. So the communication is extremely important. I just wanted to say that because it is a fact. And we really and truly need to teach our children that face-to-face communication and good old communication, sitting down and talking out issues and so without the distraction of media in front of us or items and gadgets in front of us becomes there's I can't remember who coined the statement and I love to use it among young people. Whatever we allow to influence our thoughts, influence our actions. Sorry, our speech. Whatever influences our thought influences our speech. Our speech influences our actions, and our actions influence who we are. And maybe I'm paraphrasing, but I know that it was said by somebody. But the Bible did say something similar to that as well.
My quick comment is that the sister just highlighted one of the reality of the challenges of the messages, whether it be subliminal or otherwise, that is being pumped out there. And how do a parent neutralize that? And I think that many of us want to find out how we can, because in many instances, they're not coming straightforwardly, but they are so subtle and they're pushed so much like almost like hypnotism. You keep saying it over and over and over. And little do we recognize how it is challenging our values. All right. And what used to be right is no longer right. And what used to be wrong is no longer wrong. So I think that that point emphasizes that it really is a challenge. And the more we become aware of it, the more I'm trusting that we will become deliberate to neutralizing these kind of forces that's coming against us.
Yeah, and I want to stay there for a bit. You know, the program is a fluid one, right? And you talk about resilience and the need to re-educate, etc. So we may not be going structurally tonight. I want to stay there a bit because we talk about the movement away from Christian principles towards secularism. We talk about media influences. And Mike, can we just ask everyone to mute themselves?
Yeah, Mike.
Thank you, Pastor Henry. Just mute yourselves, please. Thank you when you enter the room. So we're talking about the movement away to Christian principles and Christian values, and the fact that, as you said, Pastor Griffith, these influences are subtle. And as Aisha said, they're not just subtle, they're glamorized and they're glorified. And we use social media as a tool. And for example, things like Snapchat as a parent, where you can't go in your children's phone and read their text messages, because in Snapchat is whatever you posted and then it disappears. Of course, it's out there in the metaverse, but you as a parent cannot censor what your child is being influenced by, or what your child is saying, or the messages that are coming to them, if you're not there at the point in time, and no parent wants to be a helicopter. So then my question becomes, in terms of building the resilience and re-educating, whose responsibility is it? And I like that Pastor Henry said, once upon a time, the school will teach you how to add, subtract, and to spell, but it was the family that built the values, that would send the children out there. But in a world where the family is not teaching it, because we're asking the schools to teach the value system to our children, where we're putting them in front of the television, and so the television is building that family system, how do we then speak to the political messages that come through, the cultural messages, and even the spiritual attacks? When you think about mysticism in cartoons that come to our children, and all of a sudden, I want to be Harry Potter, or I want to be, the unicorn with all the magical powers. And then on a Sunday, you get a message, that's counter all of those, but still maybe not as impactful. Or there's no Sunday school to break down what Pastor Henry talks about, Jesus saves, and then we teach. So talk to us a bit about the political, cultural, and spiritual attacks on the family, and how we can move towards building resilience against culture and against some of these forces. I'm going to come back to you, Pastor Henry, because you started that discussion.
Yeah, so the thing is, we have to realize that the system is the devil's business. Right. One of the things I've been laboring on over the past few weeks is Daniel's prayer, when he wanted to find out what the end, or how the captivity they would fear, the people of Israel would fear in captivity in Babylon. And so he goes and he prays to God, and God responds to his prayer. And I usually say that it's easy to pray because once you utter the words, God hears. The problem is that getting the answer becomes the problem. And so here is Daniel 3 weeks into waiting, and he doesn't have a clue as to what God is saying, because there is this big warfare that is taking place within the realms, in the spirit, in the heavenly realms, that he cannot get the answer.
Mm-hmm.
But what is most important about that passage is that the angel says to Daniel, the prince of Persia, the ruler of Persia, kept me here for 3 weeks. Now, one of the things that we as Christians need to understand is that when we jump on a political bandwagon, we have to know what we are jumping on. Right? We have to understand that number of these guys who get into politics, and I'm not saying all of them, but a number of them who get into politics, they have already shook hands with the devil. And so that laws, legislation, the economy, all of these different things are geared to ensure the message of Christianity has little effect in the society. We have to understand that. And so as Christian people, when we recognize that, our teaching to our children has to be at that particular level. And this is not good because, and somebody talk about the glorification and some of these things. We have to help our young people and our children and to understand what it's all about. There is a particular program that I used to look at when I was much younger, the wrestling. And I don't do it now. I don't encourage people to look at it because it is violent, right? And the thing is that we as Christians, sometimes we are telling the children, this ain't good for you, but we are there looking at it. And you have to be able to explain why it's not good, the spiritual implications. And even though you are looking at it, you look at it in a critical sense with your family to point out to them, well, you see this is what it's teaching. That's what we need to be doing in order to be helping our the younger ones, the next generation. And that's a part of teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
That's a part of the commission that has been given to us to go and teach all nations.
Pastor Griffith.
I just before I came on here, I was having a discussion on my table with my oldest son. And I said to him, you see wrestling and you see boxing, although I said I feel boxing is worse, I think that those are two barbaric sports. Now, in regards to building resilience, I think, and we're talking from the church point of view, and I think that the church must realize that we have a responsibility to make the difference. And I said before that I find it amusing about how much we debate about whether they allow praise in church, in schools or not. And I ask myself, is it really the school responsibility to be teaching religious spirituality to my children? Is that what I really want? Is that what God designed? And then I say to my son in our discussion the other time, maybe last week, I said, look, when you look at the case of Eden with Adam and Eve and the fruit of the two trees, I am convinced the message has nothing to do with whether or not they ate the fruit. Because clearly, if we look at the tree of life, tomorrow didn't get access to it. And the same way God protected the tree of life, he could have protected the other tree of knowledge. And I said the essence was, and I heard Pastor Henry mention in his sermon recently, the essence was they believe they can do it without God. They become God themselves. And I say the problem is within the church, is that, and did I raise it here? I raise it here again. One fellow at work said to me years ago, Joseph, when I come to your church, I do not want you to read the Bible for me because I can read it myself. I know what you understand me saying. We keep, the Bible talk about the letter of the law versus the spirit. And I think we need to understand what is the principle that the Bible is teaching. Perhaps we need a radical approach to how we are doing church. Perhaps we talk so much in the spiritual language and talk that we fail to be able to bring down the thing to the practical, you know what I mean, and the principles. And perhaps we have got to bring our church now into the family. But the thing about it is that we're doing it because we want to build strength and resilience, but we've got to bring it in a natural way that they can relate. And I'm questioning how much are we helping our people to, in fact, relate or translate the principles of the Bible into their ordinary life. If you're going to do that, then it means that we have to completely rethink how we are doing church. Because if you're going to have church in your house, I'm saying it cannot be a replica of what I do at church on Sundays. I don't know. I pause.
I love that because it brings us to the whole notion of, things that we see as challenges in church, preaching as entertainment. Whose responsibility is it? What is the role of the church in supporting the family to transmit those godly principles and to build the resilience and to re-educate families on what they're supposed to do? But Brother Pei, over to you.
While I listen to Pastor Henry and Pastor Griffith talk, two things came to mind. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And secondly, you need to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Now, the church is called to be the salt of the earth, to be the beacon, that little light dispelling darkness. The family is just a structure, that small, powerful structure within the whole ambits of things, within communities and societies. And we make up the church, we make up society. If we can strengthen the family structure, if we can take a moment and sit down put aside a day or two in the week where a family can sit and have conversations on things that affect them, on the issues that they may see on the news or newspaper. And we can peel that apart and make some comparisons with the Word of God. Trust me, you will build strong families and you'll build strong individuals. My children, again, my family is not a perfect family, but we strive for perfection. My children, they would come and they would talk about things. And I am able now to say, okay, let's look in the Bible and see how, how the Bible need to address this. What the Word of God would say and how it actually, in real life, how it actually plays out. Okay, we look at the principles of what the Word says, and we have to look at it and see how practical it is. And let me tell you, the Bible is a practical book, very practical, because they had real people with real problems there. Okay, and we sometimes fail to see that. The church, again, just as Pastor Griffith said, we have to take this as a different approach. We have to approach it differently. Church is not just about going and praising. All of that is good, but when we come to the serious, practical, livable issues that we are faced with, we have to rely on it, and it has those things to uphold us. It has those foundational principles to uphold us, but we don't look at it like that. All right, we need to be able to transform how we process it so that it could mean something really and truly to our lives. The other thing is, there are so many things happening in our society, so many negative things, and the church seems to be coward in actually raising those issues and saying it is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We are afraid to stand up and be the light that dispels some of these darkness. Light is not a coward thing. That's why they say you don't light a candle and put it under a bushel. You don't cover it over. It must stand out to dispel the darkness. And when you stand out, trust me, a lot of people have to back down. Now, a lot of people think sometimes, Mr. P is so quiet and all of that, but when I speak up, and I shut up, and I let the chips fall where they may. But the issue is that the church needs to get involved in speaking up about some of the ills that are happening around it, because it seems to me that the darkness seems to want to take over. Yeah. We are called to be salt. We are called to be light, and that we must be.
Yeah, I want to thank you all for, illuminating that fact. And Pastor Annie, I'm coming back to you because, many would talk about the fact that we are in the end times and, these things are predestined to happen. And it's almost like you wonder, do you get caught up in this vacuum where you're anticipating God's return so much so that you forget that our commission is to preach the gospel until God comes, that is supposed to reach every corner. And I remember one of the things you said, Pastor Henry, was that 60% of our messages on the pulpit are about getting people to heaven. It's not about teaching them to live as Christians. And then the institutional state apparatuses take over: television, media, materialism, etc. So can you expand on that for the listeners?
Yes, the whole idea there is that as far as our spirituality is concerned, we have gone into this system that we call an organizational structure, where we have everything structured to suit what we are doing, and we are into programs. We are into all of these different activities as church, and when we see crisis, the solution is Jesus is coming soon. Let's put it that way. When we see crisis, the solution is Jesus is coming soon. I am convinced in my spirit that Christ, when he comes, he is going to have a very powerful, very strong church on the face of the earth. And there is one thing that has always made the church strong. And the same thing that people are afraid of, it is what will come to make us strong. That is persecution, severe persecution. And I am hoping that it will. But we need to remind ourselves that long before 2,000 years ago, when the apostles preached, Jesus was coming again soon, right? 2,000 years have passed and he hasn't returned as yet. 2,000 years another 2 million years may pass before he returns. The problem, the time that we have this time, 80, 90 years, if we live that long, that's all we have. And we have to make sure that what we pass to the next generation, that generation can have something to live with as far as legacy, values, virtues, as the like. So we have to pass that on. And I'm afraid that our methods are not working because we are not recognizing that what we are up against. We are not recognizing what we are up against. And I quite agree with Brother Pierre that we need to speak up and what have you. But in the environment in which we are, when you speak, you better make sure that you're not just speaking just because you want to speak. Here is Paul. They go to Philippi. The Holy Spirit says to them, here is a man in a dream, come over and help us. They go to Philippi, and there is this girl walking around and saying, strange city, nobody knows them. These men are the servants of the living God. I mean, today's preacher, he put in something on his, put in stripes on his shoulder for that. Even the demons are recognizing me. Paul and the apostle and the others, they went quiet in prayer. They made sure they knew what they were up against. It wasn't something that they could just tell the girl to hush them out and move on. They went, they prayed, they did what have you. And then on a particular day when she made the statement, they were ready for her. In the name of Jesus Christ, come out of her. And they even didn't realize what they were doing because they were affecting the economy of the entire city. You understand what I'm saying? So that when we talk about economics and all of these different things, we have to understand that the devil has his hand in all of that. And so if we are going to deal with some of these systemic challenges, that's why in my opening statement, I say that this is a spiritual battle and we have to undertake this. So I'm asking another question. I asked about the young lady who comes in and says that she is gay. What do we do as a Christian parent? Then where is the church these days in praying and fasting?
I want to come in there with the
wait, just
oh, I'm sorry. I thought you finished.
No. So that where are we in the spiritual activities? I'm not just talking about the few things, right? You go to the average prayer meeting today, and you hear pray for Ukraine. But a few months before that, 500,000 people, there about 20,000 people have died in Ukraine. But 500,000 people died in Tigray. 500,000 as a result of a war. You hear anything about that? And so we have to understand that the devil has his hands in everything in the world, and we can't allow him to just pull things over our eyes and think that one thing is bad and the other one is all right. We need to understand what is going on. Yes, Pastor Griffiths, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to focus a little bit on the devil. And I tell you what I mean when I say that. If you look back in Genesis, the very, very, very beginning, the guy shows up his face. And I said to you just now that God always had the intent for the knowledge and the tree. I believe that. All right. And here the devil comes up and he creates the first challenge or disunity or confusion between the husband and the wife. Then he moves on to the children. All right. Doesn't that say that the problem that exists and the challenges within the family can we really, I'm going to say theologically, I challenge anybody to tell me that opening of Genesis doesn't present the source of the problems that attack family. But another point coming out of what you were saying, Pastor Henry, do we really, I remember a fellow once saying, he's put the devil and stamped the devil under his feet. I said, how you do that? He said, put it down. I put it before he stamped it down. And when you think about what happened with Michael and Gabriel over the prayer that the brother mentioned, Pastor mentioned here just now, do we really understand the power of the enemy? Mm-hmm. Has he not succeeded in you know what I'm saying? And I question myself sometimes that within the church, we talk about, no, I may get some, let's hear. We talk a lot about miracles and deliverance. Now, I explain that. And I wonder if we really understand what we are trying to deliver, what are the forces we are coming against, and to what extent are we really prepared? To what extent do we recognize that? I'm not going to end on this verse in Jude. Not going to quote it, but we refer to Jude. Just say, listen to me. Moses died, God took you out, and Satan had some issue about the body. He ain't like what God do, and he can be big noise. And Michael God deal with the issue. And so Michael dare not even bring a wailing accusation against him. And if I want to talk about these beasts, they, in other words, they ain't got no respect. And I'm going to say that I believe, like the Bible says, and presents, Satan is the core. And whether or not we expect the spiritual reality, we are going to expect there's a demonic force out there, or we're going to have to conclude that I individually is absolutely bad. Man is absolutely bad. I don't know if he's redeemable at all. Or, you understand? So I think we need to be aware of the forces out there at set, and also understand that we need divine, another spiritual help to help us, because the challenges that we are facing really are more than just human. I pause.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I like Brother Fair, he let out too. it definitely is a teaching moment. It is definitely, it's not just powerful, but also sobering, because these are a lot of conversations we definitely do not want to have in church. And you know, if people can't function on earth, I think that's one of the statements that came out in the prep session. We may not be able to get to heaven. And a part of that functioning is recognizing that we don't just wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and the rulers of spiritual wickedness in high places, etc., etc. And so the idea is that, as you said, Pastor Griffith, going back to the Genesis story, the origins of the family, if that can be undone, then the devil would think that he has largely won the battle, right? And so the idea of building resilience, one of the things you had spoken about is building, getting mentorship. Yeah. And Brother Pierre, you also spoke about, you know, building the resilience is also about being taught those values that are important and how those values lend to our resilience as families. And I just want to stick a pin and say, you know, oftentimes we think of the ideal family, and of course, God had an ideal for the family, but it doesn't mean that the single parent family, that the extended family can't build that resilience as well. So Brother P, I'm coming to you and asking you, when you talk about building resilience and teaching the values, are those values the same, or aren't those values the same, whether we're talking about a nuclear family versus an extended family because of circumstances. There's an absence of one parent. We want the audience to understand that when we talk about family structure, where there's relationship and connectedness, there is going to be an attack. So over to you, Brother Pierre.
Yes, family is family, yeah? And whether it's extended family or nuclear family or a family that is have adopted children or foster family, it is family. Where 2 or 3 persons may not even be biologically know each other, but where 2 or 3 persons gather under a roof and they interact and they relate, just as how Pastor Griffith outlined earlier, they are still family, okay? The function does not change, even though how it is constructed might change, but the function does not change. And that function is to be able to communicate and interact and learn from each other some of the fundamental values that are important for its upkeep, for its unification, and for it to make a difference in wherever geographical location it is placed. All right. So I have seen single parent, mother of 4, pulling her children together and sitting down and having conversations, son and daughters. And she's reaching out to men to be able to mentor her sons because she may not have all the tools and the skills to do it. So she identified 2 or 3 men that she trusts, and she would have had good experience with and believe that they have some values that they could pass on to her son. So she allows that son to visit them and for him to be able to mentor them because she knows that she may not have those skills. You understand what I'm saying? So even though she's single parent, she's conscious enough to know that, look, my son needs these kind of principles in his life, these kinds of skills in his life. So let me hand that responsibility over to somebody while what I can do with the skills that I have, I will pass it on to them. Now, there's an old adage that says that it takes a village to raise a child. And too often, we have forgotten that. I mean, growing up, sometimes my parents never used to be home. My father, he has a shop. My mother is a nurse. And me and my brother alone have to be with the neighbor, staying with the neighbor until when we were much younger, staying with the neighbor until they would come home, whoever comes home first. More often than not is my mother, right? And I have been disciplined. Not when I say disciplined, I get licks because I disobeyed or did something out of the ordinary that the neighbor felt it was wrong. Now imagine that being done today. You know what would happen? The other parent come in and they're tearing you apart, right? But the village raised the child. Why? Because the village had within its families values and principles that were strong. We have that today. That is sadly lacking. All right. So we have, regardless of what type of family you may have, those values become critical, they become important to create good citizens. Like I tell parents, if you don't teach your children and discipline your children now, society will discipline them. You have the police officers, you have the justice system that will come in and will discipline them, and you may not like the discipline that is meted out on them. You have the gangs that may exist that will discipline them, and you will not like the type of discipline that they may mete out on your children.
Thank you. I'm going to open up the discussion. If anyone has a question, query, comment, please feel free to post it in the chat. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Patricia Neff, who's on with us tonight, and Reverend Dr. Roger Samuel, who's also here with us tonight. We will give you both an opportunity to contribute if you feel so led. If not, we are going to continue. I see your heart, Dr. Neff. Thank you for being here. We also see some persons we haven't seen in a very long time. I see Donna, I see Patrick. Good night to you guys. And of course, we see some stalwarts who are always here with us. Auntie Pauline. Oh, also Pastor McCallum is here with us tonight. Good night to you. Please feel free to contribute, to post a query, a comment in the system. There is one message that came directly, but this would have been earlier when we were speaking about the movement away from Christian principles to secularism. So when you talk about the feminist movement's influence in society, or the LGBTQI plus culture, and the idea that you do what is right and what makes you happy. The person says, today at work, I was having a conversation with a male just like a female. And while speaking to the supervisor about the individual, I was constantly corrected that I should say her. And it's happening that in our chats, the idea is that if something plays before you often enough, what you think what you know is truth, you actually start to question, because you're presented with something as an alternative, and that presents itself in such a convincing way that you think, well, perhaps I have it wrong. So if there are no other questions, comments, or queries in the chat, I want to give each panelist an opportunity to speak about systemic challenges and present, what your final takeaway is. We learned about dealing with these issues. Prayer is easy. Getting the answer is often the problem. And that we need to teach the family how to deal with what is before us, and how we need to mentor. And we know that the responsibility of passing on these values is the responsibility of the family, supported by the church. We do have one question coming in. Someone says, I'd like to know what the panelists think about gay couples adopting children. So we'll address that in about 5 minutes, and then we'll give the panelists the opportunity to give their final takeaways. Question from the audience, from Aisha. What does the panel think about gay couples adopting children?
It's what is out there is what is happening. I don't think we need to be legislating against it. I don't think that we need to be spending currency on it, arguing against it, going out and preaching against it is not going to stop it. Mm-hmm. What will stop it? What will prevent it is to get the gay couple to understand that there is a Christ who loves them, and that they need to give their life to Christ. When they are so taught and they understand, then they're not going to remain gay, just as the thief will no longer remain gay, a thief. That's what we need to do to change the world. But let me go back again to the parent, because I asked the parent, what do you do when your child comes home and says, listen, I'm gay, I'm a lesbian? What are your considerations? The embarrassment that you are going to have at church because your child is gay? Are you going to throw your child out of the house because the child claims to be gay? Look at the situation. Look carefully where you probably would have made the mistakes, and try to understand where the child is coming from, and use the opportunity as a teaching moment for the child. And hopefully, if somehow the child is bent, then there is only one way to go. You recognize that the child is influenced by spiritual forces, and you have to combat those.
Mhm.
And I'm still saying that there is the one hope for church and for families today is what I believe God promised to Solomon. And if his people who are called by his name will humble themselves and pray and seek his face, he will, and turn from our wicked ways, he will heal our land. He will forgive our sins and heal our land. I am hoping that he will do the same for us. The thing is that what I have studied of and seen of God over the years, sometimes the sin is so so much that we cannot avoid the judgment.
Mhm.
Let our generation not go down in history as being that generation where we have lost everything to the devil. There is one verse that Jesus told Peter that gives me hope every day. In this struggle, in this warfare, in this fight. Jesus told Peter, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And if you understand anything about gates, once there is a gate, there is a fence. And a gate is not put up necessarily to keep people in, it's put up to keep people in and to keep the intruder from getting in, and to keep those on the inside from getting out. So the devil has people as prisoners. And if the gates of hell shall not prevail, as not stand up against the church, it suggests to me that it's our business to go into where people are held captive and bring them out. And those gates are not going to stand against us. I have no other interpretation, no other understanding that those gates not prevail. I can't see how a gate coming against me as an individual. The gate is to prevent me from intruding. And we shall prevail if we do what God wants us to do.
My quick response is that it highlights the challenge, the reality of the challenge that we have when you are constantly bombarded with situations that are actually an imposition on us. We keep hearing them, we keep seeing them, and we keep speaking of them as a norm. I remember the last time I was in New York, just before I came back home, I listened on the radio when they said that somebody was saying that the new suggestion is that we allow our children to grow up to about 6 or 7 before the sex is decided, but the child must in fact decide that. Now, the more we hear people say that, the more it's repeated, the more is legislated, the more difficult it becomes for us as a church to oppose it, because it's played over and over and over. And there's a song that I old Calypso song I remember hearing, and it talked about Barnabas. You might know this song. And the idea about the song is that there were things that people did that were shameful years ago, but now we've come to a position where it has become the norm. And so I'm saying that certainly the situation the sister raised only emphasizes how it is becoming more difficult, and why the church, I can say the church because we're talking from the church perspective, where we need to be more aware and be more deliberate. And like Pastor Henry said earlier, we need to be more prayerful, because the forces that we are fighting is not easy. And there is a connection between sexual immorality and idolatry.
Okay, it's just about 8:55, so I'm going to ask the panelists to give their final takeaways on combating systemic challenges, or interventions against systemic challenges to the family. Brother Pierre, I'm going to start with you.
I always believe in the individual. we have to build strong individuals. We have to bring the individual to a place where he or she does the introspection, sees the gap, recognize the gap, recognize the time that they are living in and the challenges that needs to be faced. We also must fortify them with the tools that they need to have, with the values and the morals that they need to have as an individual to be able to combat. And also let them understand that this life that they live on earth is just but a very short space, a very short moment in the entire scope of things. And what we do now and how we function now and how we live now determines what happens when eternity comes. All right? We could do everything else, and at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. The time that we experience here in this body, in this space, on this planet, is just but a very short moment. And we ought to live that moment to the best that we can. Enjoy it, right? But we have a responsibility to ourselves to live it in a way that is pleasing to God so that we can enjoy the rest of eternity.
Pastor Griffith?
Yeah, I want to emphasize again that the challenge against the family came from the very beginning, and it was satanic. And when we talk about the word challenge, the ideas that come up to my mind is a bold opposition, right? And one that, and I use the word bold, a bold opposition. And we must understand how foundational the family is to society, to our health, to our well-being, you name it. And why we emphasize the matter of values, I want to say to us that we must do everything to develop good relationships, right? Love, caring, sharing, effort to understand one another, and respect. Relationships are important within the families, and also how we interact with one another, and the behaviors to develop are important because it trains us to react outside, and it helps create the security that we need. And therefore, I'm saying that whether we are Christian or not, we need seriously to understand the challenges that are boldly coming and warn against what made life worthwhile living. You're going to leave your work after 40 years of work, and all those people at work are going to forget you. And the only person you will have is your family. Do not underestimate the value of your family. Fight for them. I pause.
And before we hand over to Pastor Henry, I just want to say it has been a pleasure hosting another program with you guys this evening. Thank you to everyone joining us. Thank you for every participant joining us on Real Talk Family Life. Pastor McCallum says he's just stopping by to say hello. It's always a pleasure to have you, Pastor McCallum. Looking forward to having you on the program again in future. So we will see you guys again in 2 weeks. Pastor Henry will speak to you about that, but have a fantastic evening, everyone. Over to you, Pastor Henry, for your final words and wrap up.
Thank you, Dr. Neff. But you did promise, thank you, Dr. Sutherland, but you did promise Dr. Neff that she would say a word. Dr. Neff?
I think she was actually in another, let me see. Are you still there?
Thank you, Pastor Henry. Dr. Sutherland, this is a wonderful, wonderful session. I just want to say that the thing I love about God's word is that everything that we experience today, even the different family configurations and whether the LGBTQ, all the single dad, the single mother, the blended families, every family configuration is found in the Bible. God knew, he knew that we would be experiencing some of what we're experiencing today. So this is no surprise to him. And so I just want to challenge everyone to just, allow God to direct you and try to get back to status quo, try to get back to that family that God envisioned for us as best as we can, because he knows what's best for us, and family is what's best for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neff. Dr. Samuel.
He's actually listening in while he's in a meeting overseas, Pastor Henry. So he's not
okay.
able to
All right,
speak
so we
tonight.
can't use him. Okay,
Yeah.
and I wonder if Dr. McCallum has gone as yet. No, he's there. So Dr. McCallum, can you just say hi?
Yes, Pastor Henry. Good night to everyone. I must first let you know that I miss your company. But
yes, sir.
thank God for technology. We are settling in home and very much busy, but I certainly do not miss being with you. And as was alluded to, I look forward to be close up with you again in the near
Yes, praise the
future.
Lord. Good.
Yes, so please say hello. Please say hello to Sister Henry for me.
I will do that. Yes.
Please say.
Yes.
Well,
thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I am now going to give a close. I think I would accept my earlier remarks as my closing remarks. The time is past 9, it's up to 9 o'clock. And just want you to know, next 2 weeks, it's going to be the Tuesday after Mother's Day. And so we want to see all of the mothers on the program. We are going to have an all-male panel, and we are going to have them to honor and recognize the contribution of the Caribbean mothers, and specifically over the years from the 19th, after slavery coming forward, after the abolition of slavery coming forward. So we're going to have some history. We're going to talk about what those mothers have done, and we're going to recognize them and honor their contribution. We're hoping for Father's Day, we would have an all-female panel to recognize all the good fathers. Jesus, there's so few in between. You didn't hear that, right? But we have good fathers. We do have good fathers, and thank God for them. We need more, and they're the backbone for the family, and we want to thank you. Share the good news with somebody. Share the video with some friend, and let us spread the word, and the Lord bless you richly. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, panelists, and the Lord bless you richly.